Good morning, and thank you for listening to this presentation. I wanted to update you and let you know where we are with our folate trial for recurrent miscarriage, because since I posted the last video, we've had significant updates, and I wanted to keep you up to date. Now, for those of you that haven't seen any of the presentations before, I just want to give you a little bit of a background. So miscarriages, there are 23 million miscarriages worldwide each year, and that affects up to 15.3% of all pregnancies. And at least 50% of those, they just don't know the reason. And when we talk about recurrent miscarriage, we're talking about the loss of 2 or more pregnancies. And often there's no reason for it. And this, as you well know, not only creates emotional and financial burden, but it's isolation, it's anxiety, it's depression, because people are not getting answers. And so worldwide, it's really important for us to try and reduce the incidence of pregnancy loss. Now, it's important that we understand the word folate. And there are 3 different forms of folate that currently exist. Folic acid is synthetic. It's man-made in a lab, and it's what has traditionally been used in all your prenatal multivitamins. It's also the form that is fortified in food. So in Australia, in the US, in Canada, for example, fortification of foods is mandatory. And it is the folic acid that is in these foods. Now, there's 2 other forms. Folinic acid is a metabolically active form, but it still has to be converted to the biologically active form is methylfolate. So for you to use folate for your fertility and to prevent miscarriage, you have to convert both folic acid and folinic acid to methylfolate, because that is the main form of folate in circulation, and it is what you use to help your gene expression, help the quality of your DNA for a successful pregnancy. Now, what the research tells us is, yes, folic acid has traditionally been used. It's where the research lies currently to prevent neural tube defects. The Australian government, like other governments around the world, say that we need 400 to 500 micrograms per day in preconception and pregnancy. But emerging research shows that there's something called unmetabolized folic acid that appears in our blood at very low levels of intake. And what that means is it's folic acid that is not being converted to methylfolate. Now, some of you might have genes that prevent that happening, but there is an enzyme called dihydrofolate reductase that only copes with 200 or 300 micrograms a day. After that, it doesn't get converted and it becomes unmetabolized folic acid. Now, this unmetabolized folic acid, there's no definitive adverse effects, but it has been linked to cancer and cardiovascular disease and infertility, autism, reduced natural killer cell activity in postmenopausal women, obesity, and insulin resistance in some research. Can we definitively say it's a major issue? We just don't know, but initial studies suggest it might be. Methylfolate, as I said, has been shown to raise folate levels as good as, if not better than, folic acid. And unlike folic acid, it won't mask a B12 deficiency. And so it may be a better option to prevent miscarriage, particularly those that have problems in a gene called MTHFR, because that gene is what regulates how you make methylfolate. And so I just conducted a literature review. And what that means is I systematically went through all the research that exists on what women take in the way of folate in preconception and pregnancy in countries that have fortified foods. And it was really interesting what we found. That number one, women in preconception and pregnancy are just not getting enough folate from food, leafy green vegetables alone. The average intake was 205 micrograms. You're also not getting enough from fortified foods. So if we combined both the natural folate and the fortified foods, you still do not get to 400 micrograms a day of folate. And you do certainly not get to 500 micrograms. But if you are taking a prenatal multivitamin with folic acid in it, you almost always are exceeding the upper safe limit as set by the Institute of Medicine. And some of you will exceed the RDA, or the recommended dose per day, by 200%. And what we also found is in pregnancy, particularly, folic acid is contributing to unmetabolized folic acid levels in 97% of women, and it's in 93% of cord blood samples that is going to the baby. This was the published paper, and it was in Nutrients of this year, which is a journal that looks at many different papers that contribute to our understanding of different nutrients. This was the case series that I did a few years ago, which was a case, we looked at practitioners and we asked them if patients had MTHFR polymorphisms, what did you do? What did you give them? And it was really interesting to see that of the 12 women in the case studies, in the case series, who had multiple miscarriages, and you can see this woman had 5 miscarriages, this woman had 2 with 5 failed IVF, etc. If we changed the folate from folic acid to methylfolate, then 12 of the 12 women, 10 successfully fell pregnant and had a baby when they had all had a diagnosis of unexplained infertility. And so this is what really where my interest lies, to say, well, if we do that, will we have more success in reducing the rate of miscarriage? So there's key questions that have come out of this literature review that we do need to answer from a research standpoint. If women are exceeding this upper limit every time they take a prenatal multivitamin of folic acid, then is there a better form? Is there something else we should be recommending? And is 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate or methylfolate a good option? What does the research say about prevention against neural tube defects? What does it say about pregnancy loss? And interestingly, if methylfolate doesn't have an upper limit and it can't accumulate, then should you be taking a multivitamin with methylfolate instead? And we know that methylfolate has a good history as far as safety, and efficacy indeed, because we've got research studies, initial studies, albeit only small amounts of people, to show that it's as good as, if not better than folic acid, to get folate levels up. And particularly in depression, high doses, as much as 7.5 milligrams twice a day, have been used safely. So my study, called Folate Trial for Recurrent Miscarriage, is basically a feasibility study, which is going to let us know whether or not we can do a bigger, larger scale study down the track to test methylfolate versus folic acid in couples with a history of recurrent pregnancy loss. So we are going to take 30 couples. We're going to give one group of 30 couples folic acid, and we're going to give one group of 30 couples methylfolate, and we're going to look at the difference in their rate of miscarriage to see if there is any difference. We're also going to assess how easy is it for these couples to follow the protocols that we're asking them to follow through the duration of the trial. We now have ethics approval to proceed, That's our ethics approval number, which means we are ready to go, which is fantastic. So where we're at the moment, the prenatal multivitamins A and B, I don't know which one is which. No one in the research team, no one in the participants will know which one is which. It'll just be labeled product A, product B, and we have no insight as to what that is. So that is currently being produced right now. What we need to do now is determine our recruitment strategy. So we will start recruiting at the end of January for couples to come into this trial. If you are interested, please email me, and you can do that through the GoFunding page, or you can email carolyn.j.ladowski@student.uts.edu.au. And I will get that, and then I will make sure that when the time comes for recruitment, I will send it out to you. You do have to be in Australia, and you do have to have had 2 miscarriages in the past. So we've got funding to produce the prenatals, which is very exciting. We now need funding to buy all the Australia Post bags to send those prenatal multivitamins out. So if you know anyone at Australia Post, or you're happy to help us purchase these bags, that would be really good. I've now got to do all the paperwork for the back end and get ready, which is a huge job, with all the forms and everything into the software programs. So how can you help? We need to purchase 18 Australia Post packs of 10 bags at $192.85 per bag. So if you can assist us with this $192.85, or even assist with parts thereof, we would greatly appreciate that. So that's our immediate goal over the next month or so, is to purchase these 18 packs. So please don't hesitate to email me. I will put contact details. You can also reply through the GoFundMe page, but I really look forward to updating you. And for those of you that have already contributed, I'm thanking you from the bottom of my heart. Thanks so much, and I look forward to keeping you up to date. Bye for now.